Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Know Better, Do Better series. Chloe, girl, we are killing it. We've been getting some really good feedback about this series, and today is going to be no different, I'm sure of it. What are we talking about?
Yes, this week we're talking about first-generation wealth builders tax. So I know that that's a mouthful, but we wanted to really talk about something that we see pretty frequently with our clients, with prospective clients, and just even with our friends. Typically in Black and brown communities, there's this pressure to help friends and family once we're the ones in our family who've made it. So we wanted to really address those things this week and kind of talk about why this problem exists, some of the issues that we see, and then some practical ways to actually help the situation.
All right, but before we do that, we always start the top of every show with a series. It is called Trends, Taxes, and Tea, where we talk about the latest trends on how to save more, pay less, and we share a current event that has to do something with money. So I think we should start by talking about Cardi B. What did we learn about Cardi B as it pertains to our trends, taxes, and teas?
Yeah, so this was actually a while back, I think like in around the end of 2019, but Cardi B posted a video on Twitter that she took down shortly afterwards. And she said that she spent about $250,000 to $300,000 a month on her lifestyle. And a lot of that included helping family members. And so people were kind of outraged and were like, first of all, how do you spend that much, period? And then also, how much of this could possibly be going to your family? So it's a big issue that not only Cardi B, but so many entertainers and athletes, we've all heard the stories of people who go bankrupt or broke trying to help friends and family, putting people on payroll for doing random jobs and just all kinds of things like that. So,
yeah, there's quite a few examples of people from MC Hammer to Marion Jones over in my world, Mike Tyson. I think we saw Evander Holyfield. It's something that always makes the news when they go broke, but there's not a lot of discussion around the why behind it. And in fact, there was an ESPN 30 for 30 that's called Broke. And it was the reason that I actually got into the industry. I watched it and I was just kind of sick because, like you said, Twitter at the time, Instagram wasn't as big a deal when this 30 for 30 first came out, was going crazy. If I had that much money, I would never blow it like that. These athletes are stupid. Just all this negativity and this narrative in the same way that, like you said, where people were judging, you see the number and you make an assumption, but you don't really do any analysis between what's happening behind the scenes. And that's so much the story with the racial wealth gap, with first generation wealth builders. People see you, quote unquote, made it, but there are a lot of problems behind the scenes that don't allow people to actually build wealth, because we know 1 + 1 = 2. So if you take $2 away and you only had 2, you got 0. So it doesn't matter if you make 20 million, 200 million, or 200,000. If you spend it all, you will have nothing. And there are tons of ways and tons of people, 330 million people in America. I've heard a lot lately with people talking about like, well, Jeff Bezos gave us all X number of dollars or whatever. At the end of the day, if we split it all up, what are you going to do if you don't have the proper financial knowledge to be able to change your life and change the way that you handle things, change the way that you're dealing with money? So while we all can say coulda, woulda, shoulda about what we would do with the finances of some celebrity or some rich person out there, we got to think about how to best maintain the wealth that we're being given. Every dollar that comes in is a dollar that can be wealth. So let's get started on the topic today.
Yeah. So before we get into the main topic, I just wanted to kind of level set and talk about the racial wealth gap, because I think that plays a big factor into what we're going to talk about today. Generally speaking, I know there's so many studies out there that talk about the racial wealth gap. There's different statistics, but generally speaking, the median Black household has about 10% of the wealth as the median white household. And education does not make a difference. So a Black person who's college educated could possibly make less than a white person that's not college educated. And there's so many different factors that play into that. A lot of it's, systemic, and there's a system of inequality in regards to education, housing, lower pay, so many other things. But when you take the racial wealth gap and you add on helping family members and helping other people, that really makes it that much harder for people of color to achieve financial success.
I definitely agree. And I said, if nothing else, if you are a person who's like, I never really thought of those things, do more research. What is the other side of a story that you maybe don't know the full picture behind? There's so much kind of buzzwords or little quick facts that are thrown out, but what's the person's story behind their actual circumstances in that moment? Another good article I read recently was about a gentleman that was sitting and overheard a conversation in a coffee shop where the manager was trying to convince the woman to come back to work. And the woman was saying, I can't. I'm sorry. It's unfortunate. And the little girl came and pulled up and said, Mommy, you said we're supposed to tell the truth. And so she was kind of hemming and hawing around why she wasn't coming back to work. And she said, Mommy, tell the guy, the important man, that if you come back to work, you won't be able to get the extra money and you won't be able to help. You won't be able to take care of me in the way that I need to be cared for. And so what they were referring to was this additional dollars that are being handed out via unemployment right now. And so somebody who's not on unemployment or, is in a position of privilege might say, those people need to work, they need to do better, we need to get rid of this program, et cetera. But imagine what it's like for an additional $300 to make it more worthwhile to stay home than it does to actually go to work. That is a really tough situation to be in, to choose to sit at home because $300 is going to change your life in that way. We've really got to change the way that we hear things, that we see things, and the perspective of what other people are going through. All right, let's get going with the topic today. I know I'm rambling.
No, I'm actually glad that you brought that up. That is something that people need to think about a little bit more. So yeah, just diving into our topic, just how to balance this first generation wealth builder tax, or some people call it the black tax, with your desire to build wealth. I think there's a couple of different steps that you need to take in order to figure out how to maintain that balance. And this is something that I kind of worked on as I was working with clients and kind of figuring out how can I help them figure out their priorities and how to make that balance and actually build for themselves. So the first thing is just establishing your priorities. Think about your financial situation. You want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. So do you have an emergency fund? Do you have debt or other things that you need to take care of first? But if you don't have that emergency fund in place, there are things that can blow up your budget and get you into more debt, especially when you're helping others. So just know what your short-term and long-term financial goals are. Have a plan for yourself to make sure that you're staying on track before you go to help other people.
Definitely. And I think this is easier said than done, the idea of having a plan for yourself, because there's so many people coming from so many different directions, kind of narrative. I remember for myself as a professional athlete at age 20, it wasn't so much that people were asking, it was that they were telling me what I needed to do with my money. And I remember so clearly my boyfriend's brother saying, hey, you need to get a house. Real estate is the way that you make money. And you can get a house 3 times whatever you make. So whatever you got right now or whatever you're getting ready to earn, take that times 3 and you should go get a house. And was very confident and was really trying to help me. But just telling me automatically take my income, triple it, when one, as a professional athlete, I'm not guaranteed that income for the rest of my life. 2, you have no other financial perspective into what my goals are, my aspirations, what I need to tackle, whether or not I have an emergency fund, just so on and so forth. There's so many different things that you first need to pause. You hear all this noise, make a plan for yourself, and then move toward whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's so true. There are entertainers and athletes. I mean, there's a short shelf life. There's very few artists that have success for 20 or 30 years. And, a lot of people are one hit or one album wonders. And athletes, I mean, you can get injured. There's only a certain amount of time that you can perform at your peak. So yeah, there's definitely things to consider. You have to make sure that in that short period of time where you're getting paid very well, that you can set yourself up to live on that money for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and before people kind of start to tune out, because I know we've talked about athletes and celebrities quite a bit, but if we circle back, The name of the episode is First Generation Wealth Builder. So I do want to kind of stop and break that down a little bit more. So when I think of first generation wealth builders, that could be somebody who is the first to graduate high school from their family, the first to graduate from college in their family, the first to earn six figures in their family, the first one that was born in America that speaks English, that was able to go out and get additional jobs because they're bilingual. There are tons and tons of first as it pertains to first generation wealth builders and what people are trying to accomplish. So this is for everyone. This is not just for, like you said, people who come into that sudden wealth. This is not just for people of color. Like, there's a lot of people that come from situations of poverty and are going to be the first generation. And they're seen as, oh my goodness, you've made it. And because you've made it, you need to give back to the rest of us. And then there's all these responsibilities. So let's continue on talking about what else first generation wealth builders bump into.
Yeah. So, with establishing your priorities, in addition to looking at your financial situation, you also want to establish priorities for the people that you want to help. So, think about who's most important to you, who needs your help the most. For some people, it might be their parents, it might be siblings or very close friend or some distant relatives. But there's really no right or wrong answer. This is a personal decision. And so, as you're looking at your financial situations and prioritizing there, it's also important to prioritize the people that you want to help.
Yeah. And when I think about prioritizing the people, sometimes people are just like, well, that's easy. I love my mom. I love my sister. But you're not so sure when, like I said, people come out of the blue. So Uncle Johnny that, maybe you only see twice a year, and now all of a sudden he's homeless or his plumbing broke or there's some sort of situation. And you're like, man, I don't want to leave Uncle Johnny's hanging. He's always been nice to me, sort of thing. He might not have been on your original list, but now there are people being added to your list. That's why it's important for you to understand from the very beginning who are the priority people to me, so that I can come up with the answer and say, no, before I even get these extra dollars in my hand or this additional income or be put in a situation where I feel financially obligated for these other people.
There could be cases where people that are close, that people might think you'd want to help the most or prioritize them, might not be the ones you want to help. You could have a sibling that is not someone that you want to help, or parents that you don't want to help for whatever reason. But like I said, there's no right or wrong answers. It's up to you to make those decisions.
For sure, for sure. I think another thing that's important is understanding your cash flow. So when I say understanding your cash flow, it's the big bad B word, or the spending plan is what we cover it up and call it now. But you really need to understand what is coming in. So where are the sources of your income? And then also, what are your expenses? I think a really good exercise is to look back and see how you've helped others in the past. So I actually was just doing this last night with my husband. We were trying to find in Amazon, they used to have a little button that you could click and see how much you spent on Amazon, because I was like, if another box shows up to this house, I'm gonna have to hurt somebody. So side note is Amazon took that feature down because there was a video. I should have added this to Trends, Taxes, and Tea. Someone did a viral video recently that showed how much they had spent on Amazon and how to find out how much you'd spent. And the video went viral. People were talking about it. How could that girl spend that much money? Once again, judging her. But you see little dollars going out here and there. You don't know exactly how much. And I think some people would be really shocked if they saw in totality how much they spent on Amazon, especially in the last 365 days. Stuff got very real and we couldn't go outside. So back to understanding your cash flow, you got to go back and see, who have I helped? If it was just, oh, well, I only give my mom $20 here and there. I only do so-and-so when granny needs it. How do those things add up? That might be 10% of your income when you do the math behind it. What was it covering? Was it $20 here or there and you don't see any meaningful difference that it made in their life? And you've kind of, pilfered away this money? Or was it big things? They didn't have an emergency fund. You had to fix their roof. And what are your priorities in light of the funds that you are giving away? So you got to think about, like, what do I want for myself? What do I want for the people around me? And is this money that I'm giving away in line with my established priorities?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, whenever I go through these exercises with clients, one of the first things that I do, and I know you do as well, Lauren, is to take a hard look at expenses. And we pull actual transactions for at least 6 to 12 months. And I have clients go through and categorize those things. And In many cases, support to family members is one of those categories. And people are shocked, not only with how much they spend personally, but with how much they're giving away. I mean, it could be up to $1,500, $2,000 a month that's going out to help people in their family. And they're just like, whoa, like I didn't realize that's how much is going out. And if you want to buy a house, if you want to retire at some point, if you have other goals that you need to accomplish, that's $24,000 a year. That's a down payment for a house.
Right. Those some really nice vacations.
Yeah. That's why you're not reaching your goals, because of that money that's going out. So that's why I say at the beginning, just make sure that you understand your cash flow. And then even with the money that is going out, the people that you decided to prioritize, is that in line?
For sure. For sure. I think you also decide how much to allocate. So like I said, if you got down and you figured out the number now and it is $2,000 a month, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then what do you feel comfortable with? If it's $500 a month, look at that and look at it as a percentage of your income. I always challenge people to kind of see it in different points of view. So you may not feel $500 a month. You may not hear it in a certain way. But if I tell you over the course of the year, that's 10% of your income, or if it's 15% of your take home pay, something like that, that made me, you're like, wow. So I only got 85% of my money left for doing me. Like hearing it in different ways might also prompt you to think about something different. So then you want to set an annual budget for giving, whether that's a specific person. So like mom, I can only do $500 for the year, or let's say 600 to make my math round. So I'm going to do $50 a month. And when mom comes to me, whatever's in the $50 a month fund, if she doesn't come to me for 6 months, there's $300 in there. I can give her up to $300 to help, or there's nothing in there and she can't get any help. Or I can just do $50 a month and she can spend however she wants. She can't call me and ask me for anything else, sort of thing. The other way to do that is to say, like, this is a bucket for family in general. And this is the family bucket. If Jane comes to me and she empties the family bucket and then Bobby comes the next week, sorry, the bucket's empty because Jane already used it up. You don't want to tell them that there's a bucket because that will make them just know and understand and show up all the time. And also, too, to be thinking about the repeat offenders. Somebody that you say yes to, you kind of bail them out. They're like, oh, she said yes, I'm going to be financially irresponsible because I know I can just go back to her. I can spend all my money and then go spend some of Chloe's as well.
Yeah.
So be mindful of those repeat offenders and put them lower to the priority. Like they're probably lower on the priority list in general. But like I said, creeping up and always coming up with something begging. So
yeah, and it's always amazing too when I talk to friends and clients that these repeat offenders that come and want to get bailed out all the time, when you stop helping them, they figure out a way to help themselves. So the bottom line of this is that you don't want to start enabling people.
Amen. Amen. And speaking of helping them help themselves, that is a really good thing to do. Like teach somebody how to fish. Instead of handing out the funds to go and do this thing, save them from this emergency. Like you said, if there were no funds to get, they would find funds somewhere else. They would figure it out. However, people that you care about, you want to see them do well. And so what can you do to help them get in a better situation overall? What are your ideas, Chloe?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just set expectations so they don't become dependent on you. So can they get a side hustle? Can they create their own budget and figure out how they can reduce spending? Are they actively working on ways to help themselves? If that's something that you require in order to help them, then that's what they will do. But if you give money with no requirements or expectations, then that's when you can get taken advantage of. And at the end of the day, this is your money and you can choose whether or not to help people. And you don't have to give it freely without any expectations or requirements.
Yeah. And so this is huge for me, this whole idea, help them help themselves, because I think this is the true thing that can change the trajectory for people that come from low income backgrounds, our first generation wealth builders, have been subject to these things because of the color of their skin, etc. You really want to make a change for your community, start challenging them to do better and walk alongside them as they do better. You did better some way, somehow. They may have helped you. They may have supported you. That doesn't make you in debt to them. That means you can be in debt to them by supporting them, helping them also move up, but it's not monetarily. And I think it would be such a huge deal if we started having these conversations and started challenging these kind of pushy, I need $20. I'm in this emergency. Help me out. you owe me. I always helped you out when you were a kid. I made you get to college, or I encouraged you, whatever the case may be. Push those feelings aside and say, why can't you pay your rent? And so, like I said, in order to be able to challenge somebody else, you first have to be financially organized. So, hey, Uncle Bobby, I made a budget. With my budget, I had to learn that with my financial planner. I learned that on my own, whatever the case may be. I am not an expert, but I can help you make a budget too. So let's figure out why you can't pay your rent every month, why you're always a little bit short. Where is your money going at? Let's talk about some side hustles. Getting that conversation going and being that financial coach with the person that you care about is a huge deal. And you'll see some people will fall off because they don't want to do the work. But when you love and you care about somebody and you see they don't want to do the work, you feel a lot less obligated. Tip out your $20, your $50, because they're not actually trying to know better so they can do better.
Right, right. And another thing to think about is just consider gifts other than cash. You might have a family member or someone who's on your priority list that needs money for a certification or to help with education costs so they can get a better paying job. That's something that you can help pay for and give them a boost so that they can make more money. That's well worth it. And also, if you don't have the time or if you don't want to spend the time to help them figure out their budget, there's financial education courses that you can pay for on their behalf. You can pay for time for them to spend with a financial coach to help get them on the right track.
Yeah, really, really good points. There's tons of other things you can do to invest in a person so that they can actually learn how to fish. And my clients do this all the time where they pay for just like a 1-hour session to get someone that they care about that they know is not in a financial position to work on a long-term basis the way they do, but they trust their advisor and they say like, hey, could you, just help this person get the basics? And even the person may know the basics, but when I say it as the loved one, it may fall on deaf ears. But when you hear it from a professional, they may be like, ooh, that's a novel idea. Oh, you went to school for this? It's just completely different because somebody else said it, even though it was the same thing being said. So I definitely think that is a great way to kind of invest in someone else that you care about.
Yeah. And also, I want to talk about loans for a second because I think that's something that's super important to discuss. The first thing is just avoid making loans, period. Any money that you give to someone, even if they say, hey, can I borrow $500? I'll pay you back. If they don't pay you back, there's going to be some hard feelings. People are not going to be happy. You're going to be disappointed. And you might see, okay, well, I loaned that person $500. And why are they on Instagram posting their vacation photos? Me money. It could just get real ugly, like real quick. So we want to make sure that any money that you're giving is a gift. Make sure you can afford to give it away and don't have any expectations of that person paying you back.
Amen. Hallelujah. Because so often they still owe me 500. I know people that 6-7 years later still talking about so-and-so owe me, and like they're coming around and we can't have a good family event. We can't have a good friend event, reunion, because someone borrowed and never gave them that money back. People do not forget that. And it's, like I said, circles back to that same thing. What's going on with your situation that you need a loan? When are you going to be able to pay this loan back if you're in a constant situation? How did it all get out of control in the first place this month? Asking probing questions like that, because if they're coming to you asking for money, you do now have a right to ask those questions. Sometimes people are like, get out of my business. Don't ask me that. It's private. Well, if it's private, then you can privately deal with it. You can't come over here and get in my business and ask for my money if I can't ask you about what you're going to do with the money that I'm giving you. So be confident to have those conversations because you care.
Yeah. And then also think carefully just before you co-sign on loans. This is a big one. It can affect your credit, your ability to take out loans in the future, whether you want to buy a house in the future or buy a car or anything else, that can really affect your credit. So I would say if you're going to co-sign on a loan, you have to consider it very, very carefully. That person that you're co-signing for needs to be able to prove that they're responsible and will pay the loan back. And if they don't, you have to be in a position to pay that. That's part of the responsibility of co-signing, is that you're also responsible for the loan if that person can't pay and if you want to protect your credit. So that should always be a last resort. You can help them figure out how to get the funds themselves. But if you have to, just make sure you're very, very careful with that.
Yeah, because that could also be a relationship ruiner. And a loan could take a long time to pay back. It might be something that you agreed to pay over 20 years or they agreed to pay over 20 years. Do you want something hanging over there that wasn't actually your responsibility all the way down the road and that far in the future? Which kind of brings us to the last point is really thinking about what future obligations you want to be in charge of or you may be in charge of. And so the biggest thing I always think of is parents. One of the first things, actually, it is in the first meeting that I have with my clients, I talk to them about their parents, their siblings, and other loved ones, and who might need their financial support. So, who is in need of their support right now? Who might need their support in the future? What is their health situation of the people that they care about most? First person I usually think of is people's parents. So, if you're in your 30s, your parents are likely in their 50, late 50s, 60s. If you're one of the younger siblings like me, my mom's turning 70 this year. And so as you get older, your health is going to decline. Your parent is going to retire either because they have to or because they just don't want to work anymore. Most people in America don't want to work forever till they're 80 or 90 years old.
Or maybe they physically can't work anymore.
Or they physically just can't do it anymore. And in that situation, there are still going to be expenses related to them being alive and moving around, and everybody's going to have expenses. So think about whether or not your parents are preparing. If they are not, which is frequently the case when you are a first generation wealth builder, the people behind you don't have any wealth. That's kind of the key of the term there. And to what extent are you willing to put your goals and aspirations on hold in order to be able to look after those people who don't have wealth? What can you do to make sure that they get themselves in the best situation possible so that they are not creating an additional financial burden on you when you get to the point of you wanting to retire and do things?
Yeah, and I think the important thing here is just make sure you understand their situation, because you need to know like how much you'll have to help them. So understand what they have coming in. How much will their Social Security be? Do they have pensions that they qualify for? What are their living expenses? What's the shortfall that you'll possibly need to help them with? So the more you understand that, the more you can prepare and kind of plan ahead and start setting those funds aside before you actually need them. And that makes your life a lot easier.
Yes. Now, I must say that this is not necessarily going to be an easy conversation. In fact, it's likely not going to be an easy conversation. They will try to shut you down. They will try to ignore you. They will try to change the subject, especially if it's your parent. Get out of my business and you respect your elders, all those sorts of things. But you really have to get assertive, I will say, and find the best way to get them to open up about this. Because like you said, what stands to happen is they're not financially prepared and then they get in a dire situation and now everybody's scrambling. If we want to be the best unit as a family and we care about one another, then I need to know this information so that I can help you and that I don't need to struggle in these situations. So,
yeah, and along those same lines, talk to them about their estate plan. Do they have a will? Do they have powers of attorney for healthcare or advanced directives for healthcare and powers of attorney? If they don't have those things, then you can even offer to cover the cost of an estate planning attorney or someone to help out if needed. But that's something that I see too with clients. Somebody passes away in the family, then all of a sudden you got to come up with $10,000 to pay for their funeral.
And that's where you see the GoFundMe every time.
Yeah, it's like GoFundMe is not an estate plan. We've talked about that. But yeah, I mean, just understanding what do they have in place? Do they have long-term care needs? Do you have a history of dementia or Alzheimer's in your family or Parkinson's? Something where you can live a very long life, but you're going to have the need for some kind of ongoing health care or some kind of ongoing assistance. Have they thought about how is that going to be covered? Or are you going to be partially responsible for that? You could consider paying premiums for their long-term care insurance to help kind of offset that cost if they potentially need those things. So just kind of having those discussions. They're not easy discussions by any means, but it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Yeah, because it hurts a lot more when this happens in the moment and you're trying to figure it out. Your stress levels are on 10 when they could have been on 5, because the main thing you're worried about in that moment is your loved one. And to have to figure out all these different things, find out paperwork, sign legal documents, get guardianship in place, et cetera, on down the line just adds complexity. It adds stress. It adds anxiety. And it makes the situation a lot harder to deal with versus getting this all in place before some catastrophic event happens. And when I think about long term, this is a huge deal for, like I said, if you're a first generation wealth builder, communities of color. There's so many grandmas that are 3 generations under one roof. Grandma living in the living room because the house is not big enough for a lot of people to be living there, or kids that are sleeping on the couch because grandma got the bedroom, etc. But if you don't want your parent to end up in your household and under the same roof as you, the long-term care needs need to be addressed sooner rather than later, because I think most of us are not going to leave our parents on. Don't know everybody's situation or relationship with their parents, but I'm not leaving my mom on the street. So I've been talking to her. We're trying to get her together. She's lucky to have a financial planner daughter, but I'll say it was not easy to have the conversations with her either. She knew she was a little bit behind in retirement, and she would mention that she was behind, but she didn't want to say how far behind. I think she didn't know how far behind or what that actually meant. Changing expenses and, minimizing and downsizing. That's a hard conversation to talk to people about. You're aging. Maybe, the next house you purchase should be 1-story home instead of 2, because I don't want to have to move you again. That kind of stuff. And she's like, well, I'm fine now. I can do these stairs. I work out 3 times a week. Not easy conversations, but very necessary.
Yeah, definitely. So just thinking about how to set aside money when you're preparing for these future obligations, try to make sure you set aside separate funds. So once you have these conversations, you have an idea of how much money you'll need. Just set a target for how much you want to save and contribute to that like any other financial goals. Just like your personal financial goals, this is a separate goal. And so you want to fund that account. I would say too, you probably want to keep the funds in your name so you have some flexibility to use it for yourself if you need to, or if there's no longer a need for the money down the road. So those are just a couple of things there.
And this is not just parents. I know we kind of started drilling down on parents, but siblings, other family members, if you have any obligations for them, or you may have obligations for them, that you're talking to them in the same way we're suggesting you talk to your parents. But also, if it's siblings and family members that can help you out with the parent. So don't try to go the road alone. If you have a brother or sister that can help, let's get together. Let's make a plan for how we can help mom and dad get blah, blah, blah together. Let's have a family meeting. Who wants to be in charge? Because like I said, I don't have like the nurse gene. Like my grandma, when she needed help, my mom would give the shot. Like she would come visit and I'm like, Mom, I can't give my grandma a shot. So who's going to be the caring, loving person if there's some sort of medical need versus who's going to be like the financial, logistical person to make sure the bills get paid? Everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses. So you want to definitely make it a community conversation so that everybody can kind of have their preset responsibilities based on what their best abilities are.
Yeah. And if you have other siblings too, that, maybe they made it too, and all of you are doing well, how can you split up the cost? Set a target together and make sure you're each individually contributing to those different goals.
For sure. I think we did a really good episode today. What about final takeaways? Let's wrap it on up.
Yeah, the biggest thing is prioritize yourself first so you can build wealth. We always hear the term, put your mask on first when we're on an airplane, but you want to make sure that you take care of yourself before you can take care of others. If you're spreading yourself thin, helping everybody right now, and you can't reach your financial goals or you can't build that wealth, in the short term, it's helping, but in the long term, you're not going to change the cycle.
Yes. I think it's really important that we plan ahead. So all of these things, like I said, may not be pressing issues right now, but you don't want to do tomorrow, and then it be today. And then set those boundaries. So if there's some coming up against you, creating some pressure for you to set clear boundaries right out of the gate, your life will be so much better. It might be a hard conversation once, but I don't think it'll be a hard conversation year after year, month after month, week after week. When you finally say no, people will stop asking and they'll move on. Like you said, they'll find some other means to get things done, because before you became a resource to them, they were figuring it out. And then I would say too, just to be strategic. So much of what we do, once we have made it to a point of being able to kind of get a strong foundation underneath us, is about strategy. You can make mistakes if you're not working with someone to really get a clear plan in place. But as long as you have a strategy and you're constantly thinking about what's my next move, you're going to be in a better position than if you're just like, well, I'm going to wake up today and see what happens. And best of luck to me and everybody around me. You're always going to be in a reactive state if you don't have a strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, just for those of you who have kids, or just even with your family members and friends and people in your circles that you care about, teach them about personal finances and prioritizing themselves. That's something, the gift of financial education is something that keeps on giving. So if you learn things, if you figure out things for yourself, try to pass that on so that we don't repeat this cycle over and over.
Amen. Hallelujah. That is the premise of this podcast, is to be sharing information so that you can go and you can share that information with someone else. because when we know better, we are able to do better. And as much as I would like everybody to have a financial professional, we know that the reality is everybody does not need or is not going to hire a financial professional. But if we work together, we are going to be smarter and we won't be repeating that cycle. So let's wrap it up with today's money quote.
Yeah, so today's money quote is about our topic. It's if you want to have enough to give others, you will need to take care of yourself first. A tree that refuses water and sunlight for itself can't bear fruit for others.
I love this one because I always say, put your oxygen mask on first. And I feel like it's kind of caught on, gotten trendy. And I mean, it definitely resonates, but this was a nice way to say it differently. A tree that refuses water and sunlight, so it's not just one thing, the tree needs multiple things, cannot bear fruit for others. So good way to think of it. If you are not doing the things to restore yourself, to grow, nurture yourself, then how can you be that awesome, sweet fruit for others?
Exactly. So for our next episode, we're actually going to start a 3-part investing series. So I'm excited about that. I know it's a topic that people love to discuss these days. And so part 1 of that, which is the next episode, will be just about general markets. So understanding, stocks and bonds and mutual funds and ETFs, just all those different terms that you hear. What do those things mean? And just kind of our investment philosophy.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You have just heard another episode of Worth Listening Podcast, the Know Better, Do Better series, which is now going into an investment series. So can't wait to talk to you all next week. If you have questions, comments, concerns, anything, if you would love to share your money memoir with us, or you want to come on the show and be a guest for something, please do hit us up. Podcast@worth-listening.com.
Bye.